Welcome, everybody, back here with one of those surprise middle of a week interviews that we like to give you here. Not every week, because then it's not a surprise, but every once in a while when we think we have somebody at hand whom we should talk to. And I would say it is one of those days because I'm very, very happy to have Mark Molnar here on the show. So, Mark, first of all, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. And to give everybody the reason why we want to talk with Mark, because on D-Day, June 6th, he released his last album, EXO, through Constellation Record. It's a really, really cool thing. And it proves once again how open-minded the people at Constellation are and how good their ear is. Mark, we have to clarify that. It's not your first record ever. It's your Constellation debut. If I remember correctly, the first things or the first records that you put out were through your own label. Isn't that correct?
Pretty much. I had one out before that on a local punk and hardcore label, which was very much along these lines. But I think because I'd spent so much time in those communities and was so close to those people, they were kind enough to include that in their roster at the time. But otherwise, since then, the other close to 10 records have been put out on my own label.
Yeah, Black Bow Records, right?
Yes. Yes, sir.
And now you're from Ottawa. So how does it come that you are now an honorary Montreal resident?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there's something very specific about the struggle of living in Montreal that I wouldn't want to take any credit for or take any ownership over. But I spent a lot of time in that community. It is by Canadian standards very close by. It's 2 hours away. I will be there actually this afternoon after this interview. I'll be heading up there to see a show. I spent a lot of time there. I'm going to go see a private show with Jerusalem in My Heart and part of Sanam, who is a new group that will be releasing a record on Constellation in the fall. And they will be doing some smaller duo configurations of improvisation.
Okay. So you,
but I spend a lot of time there.
You.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time there. I have dear friends. I play a lot of music with people in Montreal. I'm very, very lucky that through those friendships, people have welcomed me into those communities.
I forgot to ask something that I normally always do, and you've already hinted at it. Usually, we like our guests to pluck some project or band, maybe that they're also in, or other bands that they like. You've just mentioned Sanam. Any other band that you would like to pluck? I'll give you one moment to think about. And I'll pluck somebody who normally, if the world was a just and fair place, would not need plugging. But I think the genius in Lustmord still needs a lot more popularity. So that's my plug of the day. Is there anybody that you would like to plug?
Yeah, that's a fantastic plug. Yeah. Such a long career and still so little recognition internationally. And I would imagine still so few opportunities for Lustmord to perform or tour even in Europe. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I play in just for full disclosure, I do play in a trio with a gentleman by the name of Nick Kufer, who plays guitar and tape machines, and a drummer, Eric Craven, called Quarter Ton. But even if I didn't, Eric is in another band, a trio called Tempête Solaire. That is fantastic. Saxophone, 8-string bass, and Eric playing drums. And they are just an incredible, powerful, it's like a combination between the kind of massive floor-shaking beats of Joy Division and Albert Eiler with saxophone. It's just an incredible group. I hope more people get to hear them.
Interesting that you describe Joy Division as floor shaking, because I think a lot of people forget, because of all the Ian Curtis stuff, a lot of people forget how danceable a lot of that music was.
Yeah, I think too, people like the records are studio constructions that don't quite capture what they were like live. And when you hear those live recordings, you realize they're just trying to pin people against the wall with the power of what they're doing. Yeah. Like the Joy Love Will Tear Us Apart has become such a romantic song for many people. Yeah. But if you hear any of those live recordings, that opening entrance of the drums is just hammering away at people before it kicks in. And then that last little bit, right when the drums come in, it picks up in speed in a way that is it's really powerful that you don't quite get from the recording.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the biggest Joy Division fan. I don't know why, but there is something about the music that is just simply undeniable.
Yeah.
Let's talk about EXO, your Constellation debut. First of all, it has a very interesting structure because officially it's 5 tracks, but basically it's 2 tracks and one suite.
Yes.
Let's talk about the suite first. What is the red fret going through Pallida Morse?
It is to be listened to as a single piece. It was broken
Yes.
up out of convenience of the way that people listen and the way that people access things digitally. But if you
Yeah.
listen to it on vinyl, or even if you listen to the CD, the physical media, you will hear it all as a
Yeah.
single piece.
Yeah. And what is the red fret behind the track? Can you explain that a little bit? What is
Well,
Pallida Morse all about?
the record was done. The record was written very quickly, in about 9 or 10 days,
Wow.
and it was written in order. So I
Mm-hmm.
had that first piece with its ebb and flow and its movement in and
Mm-hmm.
out, almost like a tide being pulled
Mm-hmm.
in and out of this melody, and
Mm-hmm.
with harmonic variations around it. And then the second piece is a very slow struggle to be able to reach a kind of release. And then that
Mm-hmm.
third piece, which is the suite that you had asked about, is the release. So it opens with the harp and violin um, playing each other's melody, and then moves into um, a heavier descending line that itself has some of the relief of the end of the second piece, and then builds back into the noise again and the descending line of the full group, and then into a long suspension of repeated piano, a meditative state at the end before it finally decays out.
It's very interesting the way that you describe it because there is one thing that I would add to all of it, and that is I listened to a lot of your other stuff in preparation for the interview, and I have to say that all of your stuff is really good. But I think with EXO, you have reached a certain point of positive accessibility that I had not heard in all of the other material. Do you think that that's a result of that short writing process of 9 days?
No, almost everything that I've done has been written really quickly, and then
Okay.
it's a process of trying to figure out how to play it and how to record it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that that piece was done at a time where I was trying to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
The other ones are solving much more internal problems of structure and
Mm-hmm.
harmony,
Yeah.
and this one is much different in the way that it moves outward toward people to listen to.
Yeah. That is also something that I felt. It tries to lend a hand, but not just to console other people, but also for personal solace. It's a very, very interesting mix. Um, there is something that I would like to ask coming from Europe, having learned a little bit of Latin. Um, you seem to have a knack for at least originally Latin track titles. We have Sub Luna, Beneath the Moon, Terre Zacher, Holy Earth or Sacred Earth, and Pallida Mors. Please forgive me, I forgot to look it up. What does it mean again, Pallida Mors?
Pale Death.
Okay. Yeah, Morse, of course. So, where does the fascination for the Latin language come from?
I learned Latin in school, sort of. I was prompted to learn Latin while I was in school, and it has come back to me later in life. And I
Okay.
spend quite a bit of time now trying to understand the foundation of the things that I read, and so much of
Mhm.
that leads back to Greek and Latin. And
Yeah.
I do have the luxury of being able to translate and read and write ancient Greek and Latin.
Wow.
Does not help me at all to be able to speak present day Greek
Yeah,
and
you cannot
Latin.
order anything in ancient Greek anywhere.
That's right.
Neither in
So
Latin.
yeah, so it's very much a personal endeavor. But
Okay.
I happened to be at the times spending quite a bit of time translating Horace. Um, and I was looking at some paintings at our National Gallery here in Ottawa, and there are these. It was kind of a mix of things. So there's this odd element that there's this figure or motif of palidomores that shows up outside of literature, particularly in paintings and in drawings coming out of the Renaissance. And there, it's almost always depicted as a young, sickly girl. And I wanted to understand why they keep doing that and why it seems unified across artists who haven't met, who are very different from each other. And when I was at the Vatican a few years ago visiting, I was able to do a little bit of research in their library and found that that figure is everywhere in manuscripts from the Renaissance. It's in margins, it's drawn right into some of the writing, and it's always around this idea of death. And the reference seems to go back, as far as I can tell, to Horace and his use of palidomores as a name or as a proper noun. But I still don't quite understand why somewhere within there there's a missing link that seems to presently be lost to history, or at least obscured for me, as to why it gets depicted as the embodiment of a small girl visiting people or haunting the pages of these manuscripts. So it was an interesting idea to me. And it really stuck with me while I was recording this.
And it's also interesting. I mean, like when you talk about it, that figure basically already has become some kind of horror stereotype. I mean, think about how many good or bad horror movies use that image as the image of death. To my knowledge, there are basically only a few images of death. You get the pale white girl, you get the pale white man. You know, it always has to do something with paleness.
Yeah, or the bleached skeleton or skull.
Exactly. Yeah. Before everybody thinks that you're Dan Brown and you're one of these.
Yeah, no.
No. But you're not Robert Langdon. How did you get into the Vatican, into the library?
Oh, well, I used to do quite a bit of work in education, and when I was in school, I was taught by Jesuits. So getting a reference letter to be able to just go and look at some of the things in the library was very simple. I just called some people that I knew, and they have access to that to be able to give people research rights. Mm-hmm. So I was able to go in and look at a little bit of that.
So then, of course, the question is, were you particularly interested in that figure, or were you interested in something else and stumbled upon palidomores?
The thing I was most interested in, I was not able to access. The Vatican is the largest occult library in the world.
Yes,
which would make sense.
As it's also the library of the wealthiest country in the world. I still say so.
Yeah, I mean, who would know more about the personification of evil than the very people that claim to be
the fighters of evil? Yes.
Yeah. So I was interested in seeing that, but I very quickly found out they're under essentially environmental access only, and you can't get anywhere near that stuff. So I had taken a tour of the library and had done just some remedial research on things that I was interested in at the time, but I kept coming across this image, and that was interesting to me that it persisted and it seemed to be kind of omnipresent among the way that people talked about this stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Fun question for everybody out there. I hope Mark can answer it. We all know that the Vatican and the Holy Christian Church has a lot of assets, some of them their own churches. And I know for a fact that the most beautiful church in the world, I might be biased, but it's the Cologne Cathedral. The most beautiful church in the world officially has which worth in the fiscal reports of the Vatican, or no, not of the Vatican, of the bishopric? Have a guess. How much is it officially worth in the fiscal reports?
How much is the Cologne Cathedral worth?
Mm-hmm. Guess. And guess low.
Guess low. Do you mean the cathedral itself, or do you mean the
cathedral itself?
The diocese?
I can't. The cathedral itself.
Yeah, I can't imagine. If you, I would imagine it.
One euro.
Really, is
In
this
the
the way that they?
in the fiscal report, it's officially stated as 1 euro.
Is this part of the way that they keep from paying taxes on things that don't cost anything?
Exactly.
Yeah, they
I
are
mean, like it's
masterful at that. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, like it's only sitting on a space inside the very heart of Cologne, which is basically
yeah.
worth what 10, 20 million euros, but officially it's 1 euro.
One, yeah. I mean, I imagine that diocese has got to be worth $3 or $4 billion. So for that to be worth one
You're very good. It
euro
actually is
is really
somewhere
funny.
between 3 and 4.
Yeah, that would make sense. Yeah.
But let's not talk about religion too much, otherwise I start rambling.
Okay.
And then it's very interesting when we look at Pallida Mors, a pale image, and you combine it with the idea of sub luna, where of course, as whenever we're standing beneath the moon or in its light, we're also pale. Is that something that drove you? That also combining those ideas, the different ideas of paleness, let's put it like that.
I hadn't quite made the connection in relation to imagery, but in the writing of the music, there was a very concentrated effort to strip things back to what was essential.
Yeah. And now comes the thing where a lot of people might wonder, like, who is Mark Molnar? Because I think that you're underappreciated. Um, we should clarify what is your main instrument so that everybody knows where you're coming from.
Strings.
Mm.
I probably play more cello publicly than anything else, but I've spent most of my life playing stringed instruments.
And that's also where you start your songs, right?
For this particular record, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there is something in your music which is, in the best possible way, undefinable. And I'm thinking of genres because I think, in a way, we as journalists, we have a love and hate relationship with genres. On the one hand, we need them. On the other hand, we despise them because it makes it too easy. There is something in your music that makes it appealing to people from across a lot of genres. And has it ever occurred to you that there are people coming to your concerts from a wide variety of industrial, of noise, of post rock, of jazz, of improv? Are you aware that you are combining a lot of people from a lot of different scenes?
I think the general feeling for most people is that they would like to have their music available to as many people as possible. But those are scenes that I've spent a great deal of time in,
Mm-hmm.
and that I find a great deal of enrichment from. That is general. What you just listed there is pretty much the music that I most predominantly listen to, and
Mm-hmm.
has been the most sustaining for me to go back to since the mid '80s, really.
Mm-hmm. And are that then also your musical influences?
Musical instruments, maybe, yeah, probably. I try not to bring the music that I listen to into the music that I write.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've watched a lot of people in my life, musicians, get into this space for very prolonged periods where they're only really able to listen to things or talk about what they've listened to based on the degree to which it suits something they're working on. And I'm always afraid that I'm going to lose, if I go down that road, I'm going to lose the things that I love about the music that I listen to. And I try to keep those two things very separate. So when I'm composing or writing or whatever people want to call it, I'm spending most of my time reading, looking at art, watching films, and trying to do something that is external to the music that I listen to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, there's very obvious sounds that I know are rooted in, like, I know that the very particular type of distortion that saturates and is interesting to me at the end of the main section of Pallida Mors, I know that that comes from my love of Celtic Frost.
Okay.
Um, the particular frequencies that separates them from others in the music that they make and the way that they represent sound. As to whether that's necessarily obvious or even needs to be obvious to anybody, I hope people just listen to it and find something that resonates with them. I think it's always nice to be welcomed by communities and to be appreciated by communities. So if people across those genres are enjoying this, that would mean the world to me, because those are essentially my people. That's who I spend most of my time around, and that's the music that I spend most of my time listening to.
So you say you try to stay away from music, which is something that I've heard quite frequently over the last couple of years, up to the degree that Emil Amos from Grails says that he never bought particular records because he didn't want to be influenced by them, which I think is like a very hardcore kind of idea.
I like, it's nice that he knows that about himself and he recognizes his own sensitivity to influence and keeps that. That's a nice thing to hear, that somebody is that self-aware.
Yeah. But when I first heard it, I was like, the collector in me was like, how can you stay away from music and not buy it? I mean, like when I look at your background, I think we have a similar idea of collecting music. So, But then, of course, the question must be, okay, give me one visual piece of art and one movie that you consumed while you were writing EXO.
I was spending a lot of time, in relation to film, I was spending a lot of time with Bela Tarr's Damnation while writing some of that music. And for art, I think the piece that I was looking at the most at that point, I was searching for high resolution and detailed color scans of the Ghent altarpiece, which are it's just so hard to find. Once you've stood in front of any work of art, it's really hard to find a proper reproduction of it in color and texture in any kind of book. Those were very much companions to me at the time. As to whether they show up in the work or not, I guess I'd be curious to hear other people's opinions, but I also wouldn't want to influence other people.
I think that's something that we very, very often forget. However you perceive your own music, however I perceive your music, however a third person perceives your music, is totally depending on that personality, that point in time, and even that location, and even to a certain degree, I think the medium through which you listen to it. You know, is it a streaming service? Is it the vinyl? Is it with headphones? Is it without headphones? Is it a certain time of day even, right? Did it ever come across to you that when you wrote your own things and listened to it and revisited it, maybe for rehearsal or whichever particular need, that when you revisited it, it sounded completely different from when you wrote it and recorded it?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. Okay. And it's so hard. That's part of the process of being very dedicated in mixing, is to make sure that I'm not allowing other environments to change, or even to an extreme degree poison the experience that I'm having of trying to make sure that this is as balanced as possible and is clear based on my intent to try to communicate something to a listener.
So do you then keep the method exactly the same, always stereo, always vinyl, always the same setup?
Well, that side of it is unfortunately limited to a couple things. One of them is the economics of it, which is becoming increasingly expensive. And the environmental impact of it is becoming harder and harder to be able to sustain. On the other hand, those objects that have such a high environmental impact are the objects that are going to last the longest. So to have an interest in leaving something for the next group of people to inherit, and the next generation, even culturally in the next 5-7 years, there's a dissonance between wanting to be sensitive to the world that we live in and wanting to make sure you leave something behind that people can find. But I also recognize people are going to listen to it in completely different ways. Some people are going to sit down and do nothing but stare at the speakers. Some people are it's going to be wallpaper for them. It'll just be on in the background. Some people, it's going to accompany them during the only time of the day when they listen to something, which is maybe when they're working out or when they're doing their dishes. There are all these
Or
other
going to work.
environments.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's all these other environments it's going to go into. And my job as a kind of labor is to try to get it into a state sonically that it will be accessible to people across those different experiences.
So that's what I meant. When you are recording and mixing your own things and you are revisiting them, do you always keep the same setup or do you also change the setup?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I change the setup quite regularly depending on what feels right for the pieces and what feels right sonically for what I'm trying to communicate or what's available to communicate. Yes.
So what takes longer, the writing or everything after? The writing and recording or everything after?
The mixing takes the longest. Yeah. The
So
recording's usually pretty quick. The writing's going to take what time it takes. But it's not usually as long as the mixing. But the mixing takes the longest amount of time because that's the process where I have to do two things. I have to hear it in relation to what I'm trying to achieve, but I also have to hear it based on the way someone other than me is going to receive that work. And that's a very hard thing to figure out. I'm very lucky. I have a good group of friends that I can send things to and say, am I on the right track? Does this sound okay? Can you listen for the bass here? What is this doing on your system? But I have a really wonderful mastering engineer in Montreal, Harris Newman, that I can send things to, and he will tell me in a clinical way what he's hearing, but he'll also tell me in a personal way what he's hearing of my work because he's mastered everything that I've done. And he's known me for a long time. We've played shows together and he's got a really good sense. Yeah. Yeah, he understands really well. And then, Constellation was absolutely essential. Ian from Constellation gave me a perspective on this that I wouldn't have had if I were releasing this on my
own. Mark, last question before we come to the infamous quickfire round. When I look at the cover of the new record, I mean, like everybody in post-rock seems to have an obsession with water and oceans and music, stuff like that. But this particular thing, I'm not sure if you are familiar with it, but it reminded me a lot of Hokusai's The Great Wave, this Japan painting that now has been reproduced over and over and over and over. Were you aware of that semblance? Because of it's not only the wave, but also the mist above the wave. That's what reminded me so much about it.
I wasn't aware of it in the choice of the artwork, but that is such an iconic and ubiquitous image across time that it's very hard, I think, to have any depiction of a wave that wouldn't go back to that image.
Especially when it's blue, like yours, dark blue. Yeah. Are you happy when somebody connects it with that?
Yeah, I'm happy when anybody makes a connection in their personal experience to anything in the music.
Have you ever come across a connection or interpretation where you said like, okay, that is totally not what I wanted it to be?
Yeah, but I never share it with that person because it's a really vulnerable thing to walk up to somebody you don't know and to offer them your experience. And I want to be as sensitive and as understanding as possible with them about that. So I would never want to take that away from someone. And I also recognize, I'm getting a glimpse of a person. It's a tiny little fraction of their life, and that may be what they're experiencing or able to say at the moment, but that may change over time. And I wouldn't want to say something that might interrupt their ability to transform with the work or to progress with the work, or at some point to just leave it behind. That happens too, and I'm okay with that. There's records that people love at a certain time in their lives, and there's records that they just they leave it behind. They move on to something else. You know.
I totally understand it, and I love the idea of giving people their space and freedom to do so. But we both know that there are certain interpretations when your work would be set in the wrong context or placed in the wrong connections, where you surely would disagree and would say something. I was thinking of,
Yes.
let's imagine the orange shit sitting in the White House would want to play one of your records at one of his rallies. You would be like,
Oh,
uh-uh.
I'd be so happy to I that would be the easiest money ever spent on lawyers. Yeah, to cease
Yes,
and desist. Of course, absolutely, of course. Yeah, I wouldn't
but
want the music to be used toward anything that leads to the
yeah,
oppression or
yeah,
degradation of other people. Yes,
yeah,
so there's that. But no one's ever yet come up to me in those situations. And I
yeah.
think the context that most people would meet me is they're in environments that doesn't leave much room for a
Mm-hmm.
sympathy to fascism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good to hear that. I always love when people are clear about that. So, Mark, first of all, thanks for the insight into EXO, the writing process, your role as Robert Langdon for the post-rock scene. But nobody leaves a Veil of Sound interview without having to go through some terribly hard questions. And I know that you have some kind of also classic or modern classical background. I'll start with some of those people that your work is very often connected to. Let's start with Ligeti. You have to choose between Ligeti's Project 2 and Ligeti's Project 4.
Project 4.
Can you explain why?
Um, Ligeti had these two worlds that he was constantly dealing with because of the censorship around him. He talked about how he had his compositions for the public and he had his what he called his bottom drawer
Yeah,
work that he would do for himself that he never thought would ever be heard, let alone seen by anybody else during his
yeah.
lifetime. And he really there are some points in his letters where it is heartbreaking that he's not sure anyone's ever going to see any of it at all because
Mm-hmm.
of the nature of the oppression and the fascism that he's living under. Just a horrific regime in relation to humanity. But now that we know what he was working on privately, there are motifs in 4 that come from that bottom drawer in ways that 2 does not. And I think that as you move forward in his work, he starts to become bolder in introducing some of those things. And it might be a desperate grasp to try to be heard even within these horrific constructs, which is something that we see across history, you know, even in the worst moments in history, like in concentration camps, people are still writing music. In gulags, people are still teaching each other poetry and reciting it. It's as essential as food and drink.
Yeah.
But in 4, there's a couple sections in there that very specifically are things that he had inserted as a kind of foil to that oppression, and it's wonderful to hear in our present context.
I would like to move on to Henrik Goretzky. I'll give you his Miserere or Symphony Number 3.
It's really tough. For personal listening, Misère, absolutely. That's the one that I would go back to of the 2 more than the others. But I have seen some performances of Symphony Number 3 that are overwhelming. And the place that Symphony Number 3 now occupies in people's cultural consciousness is really important. I hear it everywhere. It's in the number of film soundtracks that owe his estate money is shocking. So yeah, for personal listening, it would be Misère. But for cultural impact, I think number 3 is incredibly powerful for people.
It's very interesting that you say that, because that was also the way that I met, so to speak, Goretzky. I listened to a movie soundtrack that I liked, and there was one particular neoclassical thing. I didn't know who it was, and all of a sudden it's Goretzky, and it's part of Symphony Number 3, and it's just so overwhelmingly good. That was my gateway into Goretzky.
Yeah, it's an amazing work. Even in excerpts, it still holds the
And
integrity of its
works.
melodies. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I would like to move on to a more modern avant-garde kind of way, and I would like to talk about Stars of Alit. Which one would you rather listen to? Their, so to speak, self-titled record, or tired tired sounds of Stars of Alit? That's their so-called basically self-titled record, or and the refinement of the decline.
Yeah, definitely the refinement of the decline.
Okay. Again, can you explain why?
They're a really funny project to deal with historically. Those records had come to me through my local record store, and they were just these weird offerings that were available, but it was hard to find a context for them. And then they
Mm-hmm.
started to tour, and this context emerged of seeing them live long before they were using a string quartet, and it was so sweet to see them because every single time I saw them, their equipment was breaking down, and there was noise entering into the signal, and it didn't quite work. And yet the insistent innocence that people brought to those shows and a kind of disbelief that they were actually going to hear this stuff performed live completely overcame any of the technical problems. And it's amazing to see a crowd being so forgiving of things that aren't really a problem in the first place, but you can see the band is really struggling with. So
Yeah.
I feel very privileged that I got to hear it as this bedroom project. I got to see those early days of them trying to figure out how do I take this out of the bedroom to the stage.
Yeah.
And then the last tour, they were opening the shows with an Arvo Pärt piece. They had a string quartet with them. They had pulled from their catalog this arc that brought them into a whole new way of people hearing them. They were. It was a very special project to see develop.
Mm-hmm. And let's move to your now roster label mates.
Oh God.
I'll give you two bands to choose from: Do Make Say Think or A Silver Mount Zion.
Uh, Silver Mount Zion, I think.
Okay. And of course, the Constellation band, Godspeed You Black Emperor. I'll give you Lift Your Skinny Fists versus No Title as of February 13th, 2024.
No title.
That's
I
interesting,
should.
Ken. Yeah, go ahead.
I think their best work is yet to come.
It's interesting.
I've seen them so
Yeah.
many times.
Mhm.
I actually just had this conversation with somebody yesterday, so please forgive me. But somebody had said to me, "Oh, I wish I'd seen them back in the day, like before they went on their hiatus." And I really had to very quickly but politely let them know, like, if you want to see them, you should see them now. They sound better than ever. What they're doing live is clearer than ever. The responsibility that they've taken over their work now publicly is something that everyone should really take a note of. And I think when you're dealing with a band that is that strong and is that grounded in what they do, um, we should all be looking toward what they do next.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just browsing for some of my pages because I'm thinking of something. But nevertheless, I have one more, and I'm not sure how hard or easy this one is for you. I always try to come up with some of these things during the interviews, and you gave me one that I need to ask. As you were speaking about your love of Celtic Frost, Into the Pandemonium versus Monotheism.
Monotheism.
Interesting. I would also say that. And I know that a lot of people like, oh no, you got to listen to the 80s stuff. And I'm like, no, Monotheist is just,
Yeah.
I think that is peak Celtic Frost. And it's
Yeah.
similar to your explanation for Godspeed. Yeah.
I think when you're dealing with really good artists, their best record is their next record.
Mhm.
And I don't think we're anywhere near. I think that age and time is going to catch up to Mr. Fisher before he's able to fully express what he has available to him.
Yes.
Um, I'm very, very lucky. I saw their very first tour of America and Canada, uh, July 4th, 1986, the concert hall in Toronto. It was them and Voivod, and it was unbelievable to see them play that music, to hear those frequencies cut through in a way that nobody else in North America was doing. And there's a context to the development of that band where they were trying to make sense of what was going on around them. And
Yeah.
that leads into this Wall of Voodoo cover. And that is a good bridge into Cold Lake. As much as people love to have something to hate, it's
Yeah.
really important to recognize the context that was done in and what was being asked of them and what they were asking of the world around them. And I recognize that he has publicly taken an adversarial position to that work. I respect that, but it's it is a catalyst for the kind of commitment that he made back to his vision in the first place. And yeah, Monotheist, the sonics of that are astounding. The writing is incredible. The structure of it is incredible. It's really a monolithic record. It's really a powerful expression. But
Yeah.
I still think, with Triptychon, like I would whatever they do next time, I'm all in. I will buy it sight unseen and unheard. I'm happy to see. I will follow him wherever he wants to go and with whatever
Mm.
they want to do with those projects.
Yeah. I was just wondering when you were talking about Cold Lake, isn't that the record where they tried to get Connie Plunk to record it, and he died before he was able to do it, and then they were just left in the studio, and it was one of the most horrible experiences they ever had.
I
Uh,
think
if
so,
any
yeah.
if any one of our listeners can clarify that, please do so in the comment. I have one more thing that I just remembered, and when we were talking about Godspeed, and that's why I was skipping through my pages. Um, there is one band for everybody out there who really likes Godspeed You Black Emperor. If you have not yet checked out Bruy from is it Toulouse or is it Montpellier? I always forget. It's one of those cities in the south of France. Uh, you should check those guys out because they are probably gonna be, if nothing goes in between, they're gonna be the Godspeed of our generation.
Oh, okay. I have not heard them. I
I'll
will
send
check
you a
it out.
link. I'll send you a
Thank
link
you.
afterwards. So, Mark, first of all, thanks for all the insight. Thanks for the wonderful details of the record. And now I will not only say goodbye to you, but I will have to say goodbye to this little thing here. My first notebook, which I used for the first 2.5 years, 3 years of Veil of Sound interviews. So I already got a new one. So Mark, thanks for being the last one that I needed this for.
Thank
Um,
you for having me.
Thanks for the wonderful music. And everybody, as I said, since June 6th, you can listen to EXO, Mark's new album, through Constellation Records. Please do so. I would advise with good headphones, but whichever your environment, as you've now heard, every environment is good for Mark. So, but please give the record a listen. Mark, thanks for your time. And yeah, last words for you.
Thanks for having me. It's kind of incredible what you've done with this website and with these interviews over the years. Just looking back through them and the sensitivity that you've shown across different projects is really admirable. I really appreciate what you've added to people's collective consciousness through this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.